On our anniversary trip, my wife said, "I want a divorce." I replied, "Why wait?" Then I canceled her return flight and left her with her share of the hotel bill. I landed to a call from my mother-in-law informing me she was being detained for the unpaid charges. I, 38 male, am writing this from my home office, the one she always said was cold and uninspired. Right now, cold and uninspired feels like a victory. 2 days ago, my wife Heather, 35, and I were on our 10th anniversary trip. A 5-star resort on a pristine beach. I booked the best suite, the one with the private plunge pool. I thought we were there to reconnect. We'd been drifting, but I figured a decade of marriage deserved a grand gesture, a real effort. On the night of our anniversary, at a restaurant where the wine list had its own table, she dropped it. Not with tears, not with regret, but with the cool efficiency of a project manager closing a dead-end account. "Tyler," she said, setting her fork down with a delicate click. "I need to be honest. This isn't working for me anymore. I want a divorce." For a second, the world went silent. The clinking of distant glasses, the soft music, it all faded into a dull roar in my ears. I just stared at her. The waiter was approaching with a dessert menu shaped like a seashell. I must have looked like a ghost because he stopped, gave a slight bow, and retreated. "What?" I finally managed to get out. It felt like I was forcing the word through a throat full of sand. "I've outgrown this," she said, gesturing vaguely between us. "I feel like I'm playing a part, the dutiful wife. I want to find my own path, my own happiness." It was the corporate speak, the detached, HR-approved breakup language that cut through the shock. This wasn't a moment of emotional crisis for her. This was a scheduled announcement. My mind raced, trying to catch up. I asked the obvious question, the one you have to ask. "Is there someone else?" She gave a little sigh, a puff of annoyance, as if I was being difficult. "I've reconnected with someone, yes. Dennis, he's an artist. He sees me, Tyler. He sees my soul." Dennis, a name I'd heard. A guy she'd met at a gallery opening a few months back. I'd paid for her ticket to that gallery. I'd encouraged her to go, to network for her art career. The pieces started clicking into place with nauseating speed. Her recent late nights at the studio, her phone always angled away from me, the new, expensive perfume. This wasn't a decision. This was the final presentation of a plan that had been in the works for months. She had waited until I flew her thousands of miles away, to a place I paid for, to tell me she was leaving me for another man. The sheer, calculated disrespect of it was breathtaking. I felt a strange calm settle over me then. It wasn't a lack of emotion. It was the opposite. It was a surge of pure, cold clarity. A defense mechanism to keep myself from shattering right there at the table. She expected a scene. Tears. Pleading. A dramatic vacation-ruining fight where she could play the tragic heroine finally breaking free. I looked at her perfectly composed face, waiting for my outburst, and I decided in that instant I would not give her the satisfaction. I let the silence hang for a moment, then gave her a small, tight smile. "Why wait?" Her composure finally cracked, a flicker of genuine confusion. "What?" "For the divorce," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "You want it? I accept. Why wait until we get home? We can start now." I stood up, pulling my wallet out. I dropped enough cash on the table to cover my meal and half of the bottle of wine. "I'm gonna go pack. I wish you and Dennis the best." I walked away without looking back. I could feel her eyes on my back, could feel the shock radiating off her. This wasn't in her script. Back in the suite, I moved with methodical speed. I packed my suitcase. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and made the call. It took a frustrating 20 minutes on the phone with the airline's platinum desk. But since the tickets were booked using my miles and under my top-tier status, they allowed me to make a change to an individual passenger. I canceled her return flight. The miles were gone, but the principal was worth more. Then I went to the front desk. A very professional young woman named Maria was there. I explained the situation calmly and politely. "My wife and I are separating, effective immediately. I will be checking out now. Please charge my half of the remaining nights on the room to my card, as well as all of my own incidentals, the bar tab from last night, my spa treatment. She will be staying and will be responsible for her half of the room from this point forward, plus any other charges she incurs." Maria looked concerned, but handled it with corporate efficiency. She split the bill as I requested. I paid my share, settled my accounts, and called for a taxi to the airport. I was on a red-eye flight within 2 hours. I landed this morning. Switched my phone off airplane mode. It buzzed alive with a storm of notifications. 23 missed calls from Heather. A string of increasingly frantic and angry texts. I didn't read them. I just blocked her number. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. It was my mother-in-law, Janet. I almost declined, but something made me answer. "Tyler, what have you done?" She shrieked, her voice a piercing nail on a chalkboard. "Janet, hello. I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Don't you dare be clever with me. Heather just called me, crying her eyes out. The hotel won't let her leave. They say she has an outstanding bill and they're holding her luggage. They have her in some back office. You have to call them and pay it. You abandoned her." I let her tirade wash over me. "No, Janet," I said, my voice flat. She ended the marriage. I simply accepted her decision and ended our shared vacation. Her bills are her own now. I suggest she call Dennis. He's the one who sees her soul, after all. Let's see if he sees her debt too. I hung up. Then I made a fresh pot of coffee and sat down in my cold, uninspired office. And you know what? It feels pretty damn good. Update 1. Well, it's been a week. A week of silence on my end and a whole lot of noise from everyone else. Thank you for the comments on my original post. It helped to know I wasn't crazy for reacting the way I did. A lot of you asked for an update, so here it is. The call with Janet was just the opening salvo. As I predicted, Heather had to call Dennis to wire her the money for the hotel bill and a new, last-minute, full-fare flight home. Janet later called back to inform me, in a tone dripping with acid, how humiliating it was for Heather to have to ask her new partner for money so soon. I told her that sounded like a them problem and to lose my number. Then came the texts from Heather's friends, all variations on the same theme. "Dude, WTF? You can't just leave her like that. She's devastated. You're being a monster." It was a coordinated campaign. Funny how none of them seemed to care about the fact that she cheated on me and broke up with me in the most calculated, insulting way possible. It was clear they'd only gotten the tragic heroine version of the story. Heather herself finally got a message through to me via email, since I'd blocked her number. It was a masterpiece of entitled delusion. She accused me of emotional violence and financial abuse. She demanded I reimburse her for the hotel bill and the exorbitant cost of her new flight. The bill from her boyfriend, Dennis, was apparently now my responsibility. The email ended with, "You owe me that, Tyler, after everything I sacrificed for our marriage." I just stared at that line, the sacrifices. Like the art studio I'd been paying the lease on for the last 2 years. A little creative space for her to find her passion. A $1,200 a month sacrifice, to be exact. Something about that made me curious. I've always been meticulous with finances. It's my job, after all. I'm an accountant. When something doesn't add up, I investigate. I started pulling up the old statements for the credit card I'd given her for business expenses related to the studio. Art supplies, marketing materials, that sort of thing. I was a guarantor on the account, but it was in her name. The first few things I saw made my stomach clench. A charge for a high-end dinner for 2 at a trendy downtown spot on a night she was supposedly networking at the studio. A charge from a luxury lingerie brand. Multiple charges for a high-end hotel in a city a few hours away. A hotel with a very romantic reputation. The dates matched up with a girl's weekend she had taken. The more I scrolled, the clearer the picture became. The art studio wasn't just a studio. It was a front. A slush fund for her affair. The money I thought was for canvas and paint was actually for champagne and secret getaways with Dennis, the soul-seeing artist. My brief moments of sadness over the last week, the nostalgia for the woman I married, it all evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She didn't just want a divorce. She wanted to continue living the lifestyle I provided, but with him. She wanted her freedom, my money, and to be praised for her bravery while doing it. I spent the entire weekend creating a spreadsheet. Every questionable charge, every date, every lie she told me to cover it up. Yesterday, I hired the most ruthless divorce lawyer I could find. When I showed him the spreadsheet, he didn't even blink. He just smiled, a thin, predatory smile. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "this should be straightforward. Heather thinks this is about the hotel bill. She thinks I had a moment of anger. She has no idea what's coming. She didn't just end a marriage. She started a war with an accountant. Big mistake. Update 2. It's been a month of tactical silence from my end and escalating entitlement from hers. Things have gotten messy, and I've discovered the rot goes deeper than I ever imagined. 2 weeks ago, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Tyler, it's Dennis. We need to talk. Heather is very distressed. Be at your house tomorrow at 2 p.m. so she can get her things. We need to be adults about this." The sheer nerve. He wasn't asking, he was telling. And the "we" wasn't lost on me. They were a team now, coming to the home I paid for to demand things. I replied with one sentence, "My lawyer will be in touch to schedule a time with a third-party supervisor present." They didn't like that. They showed up anyway. I was at my desk when the doorbell rang. I looked at the security camera feed on my phone. There they were on my porch. Heather, looking tragically wronged, and Dennis, a guy with a stupid scarf wrapped around his neck, looking smug. He had his arm around her. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the speaker. "Heather, you are not welcome here unannounced. As I said, you need to go through my lawyer." "Don't be an infant, Tyler," she yelled, her voice cracking. "My entire life is in that house. My clothes, my art." Dennis stepped forward. "Mate, just open the door. Don't make this harder than it has to be. We just want her things so we can move on." The condescension, the mate, it was like a movie. I saw red, but I kept my voice flat. "This is my property. You are trespassing. I'm giving you 30 seconds to leave before I call the police." They actually stood there, whispering to each other, like they were deciding if I was bluffing. I counted to 20 and then dialed. When they saw me on the phone through the window, they finally scurried back to Dennis's beat-up convertible. The police arrived, took my statement, and I now have a record of them showing up unannounced. My lawyer was very pleased. But the real development came from my lawyer's office. I had told him about the studio I was funding, and he agreed it was a major financial point. As part of the discovery for the divorce, he subpoenaed all the financial records and contracts associated with her business. He called me last Tuesday. "Tyler, you're not going to believe this," he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "I'm holding the lease agreement for the studio space. About a year ago, your wife and Mr. Dennis Vance co-signed a new lease with the landlord, re-registering the space as a commercial entity called Vance Gallery. They were building his commercial art gallery in his name, while you were still paying the rent via the original auto draft you set up. It's airtight." I felt the blood drain from my face. She had converted her private "I need to find myself" studio, which I was funding, into a commercial gallery for her boyfriend. She'd put his name on the lease with hers, making them business partners, all while my money was paying the rent. They were building their future on my foundation. My lawyer's voice cut through my shock. "This changes everything, Tyler. This isn't just infidelity. This is fraud. We can go after both of them." So the new plan is in motion. We are no longer just arguing about assets in the divorce. We are filing a separate civil suit for fraud against both Heather and Dennis. We are seeking repayment for every single cent that was funneled into that sham gallery and her affair. Heather sent one more email last week. The tone had shifted from anger to a weird sort of bargaining. She said she was willing to forgive my actions at the resort if I would just agree to a simple 50-50 split and reasonable alimony so she could get back on her feet. She still has no idea. She thinks she's negotiating the end of a marriage. She doesn't realize she's a defendant in a fraud case. They wanted to be adults about this. Well, they're about to get a very adult lesson in consequences. TLDR, Heather and her boyfriend showed up demanding her stuff. I called the cops. My lawyer discovered through official discovery that she converted the studio I paid for into a commercial gallery for her boyfriend, putting his name on the lease. I'm no longer just divorcing her. I'm suing them both for fraud. Final update. This will be my final update. The dust has settled, and the final accounts have been rendered. The last 6 months have been a masterclass in legal maneuvering. My lawyer, bless his cold, calculating heart, was relentless. We moved forward with the divorce and the civil suit simultaneously. Heather and Dennis, predictably, lawyered up. Their initial defense was laughable. They claimed I was a willing patron of the arts and that the money was a gift to support their shared creative vision. The day of the mediation was something I'll never forget. It wasn't in a courtroom, but a sterile conference room in a high-rise building. Me and my lawyer on one side of a long mahogany table, Heather, Dennis, and their lawyer on the other. Heather looked thin and stressed. The tragic heroine act was wearing thin. Dennis was trying for a look of bored indifference, but his bouncing knee gave away his anxiety. They still had an air of arrogance about them, like this was all just a messy, inconvenient misunderstanding that a check from me would solve. Their lawyer started, outlining their proposal. They wanted the house sold, a 50-50 split of the proceeds. They wanted me to pay out the remainder of the gallery lease, and they wanted 5 years of significant alimony for Heather, citing her contribution to the marriage by sacrificing her career. My lawyer listened patiently, head cocked. When the other lawyer finished, he didn't respond. He simply looked at the mediator and said, "We reject that offer in its entirety. And now, for our presentation." He placed a thick binder on the table. "This," he said, "is the Heather and Dennis project binder." He opened it. The first page was a blown-up photo of them, smiling on a hotel balcony from Dennis's own social media. The date stamp was clear. It was from his birthday weekend, the same weekend Heather told me she was at a silent meditation retreat. Then came the spreadsheet, now 20 pages long, itemized, dated, cross-referenced with her lies. My lawyer walked them through it, his voice calm and monotonous. Page 1, itemized list of dinners for 2, totaling $4,780, charged to the art supplies credit card. Page 3, hotel stays including the St. Regis where Mr. Vance's social media shows him celebrating your 6-month anniversary, total $8,150. Page 7, direct transfers to Mr. Dennis's PayPal listed as consulting fees, total $22,000. Heather's face went from pale to chalk white. Dennis stopped bouncing his knee. He was perfectly still, staring at the numbers. Then came the grand finale. My lawyer presented the legally obtained, signed lease for the gallery, the one with both their names on it. He presented bank records showing the auto draft from my account paying the rent for their joint commercial venture, month after month. The total sum, my lawyer concluded, that Mr. Thompson can prove was fraudulently diverted from him to fund this affair and this undeclared business partnership is $83,450. Not including the future liability of the lease they both signed. This constitutes a clear case of fraud by deception, which we are fully prepared to pursue in civil court. The discovery process for that would be extensive. He slid a document across the table. This is our settlement offer. Heather gets nothing. No alimony, no share of the house. She walks away with her personal belongings and the significant credit card debt she accrued in her name. In return, we will drop the civil suit for fraud against her and Mr. Dennis Vance. Their lawyer's jaw was tight. He whispered furiously with Heather and Dennis. I could hear snippets. Criminal charges, perjury. They have everything. Dennis looked at Heather. But it wasn't the look of a man who saw her soul. It was the look of a man realizing his business partner and meal ticket was a massive liability. The look of a man who was just told he was on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars. Heather started to cry. Not the composed, delicate tears from the anniversary dinner. These were ugly, panicked sobs. Tyler, please, she whimpered, looking at me for the first time. You can't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said, my voice even. These are the consequences of your own choices. You wanted to start a new life, here it is. They took the deal. They had no choice. The aftermath was swift. Heather had to move in with her parents. The credit card company, armed with the evidence of her fraudulent spending, is pursuing her for the full balance. Her credit is shot. Janet and Robert called me one last time, but the fury was gone, replaced by a weary resignation. They asked if I could just help a little. I said no. Dennis, as predicted, bailed. The last I heard, he had moved to another city. The gallery, of course, folded. The landlord is now going after both of them for the broken lease. As for me, I sold the house. It held too many ghosts. I moved into a modern apartment downtown, one she would have hated. It's clean, bright, and mine. The spreadsheet is deleted, the binders are shredded. I took the money I saved from the divorce and invested it. My future is my own again. I don't feel happy, not in a fist-pumping celebratory way. There's a scar there, but I feel balanced, vindicated. The scales have been set right. I responded to a calculated betrayal with calculated consequences. I didn't yell, I didn't scream, I just did the math, and the math was undeniable. I'm going on a trip next month, by myself, to a place with mountains and cold, clean air, just me. And that's more than enough.